Journeys Through Spacetime by James Talisman. Chapter 11, EarthVerse, Contradictions of Thought Part 2. Present-day New Haven, Connecticut. Shortly after the sun had set for the day, Thomas walked up to an old brownstone building just a few blocks from the Yale campus. Once inside, he punched a code into the security lock on a large metal door and continued down 3 flights of stairs leading to an anteroom. On the far wall was another modern entry door. As he approached the door, scanners in the surrounding walls and ceiling picked up his presence from the chip implanted under his skin. A small sliding door opened to the right of the larger entry door. Thomas rested his chin on the now protruding platform and aligned his eyes with the small slit as green beams scanned them. Soon a loud click came from the entry door as he reached for the handle. As was the case each time he entered this space, Thomas felt like he had gone back in time 200 years. Rock formed the walls of the main great room and all the smaller rooms that adjoined it. The great room walls were almost 30 feet in height, with a ceiling that formed an upside-down funnel. The ceiling funnel emptied up into a chimney stack that ran all the way up to the roof of the old building. Observing hooded figures mingling in the dimly lit great room, Thomas slipped into a side room to put on his own hooded robe. Walking out, he nodded at the others as the familiar smell of burning gas from torches filled his nostrils. While effort was made to clean up after certain rituals, the faint smell of blood always lingered in the air. While everyone else was dressed in black robes, one person wore a red robe with gold trim and displayed a demeanor indicating leadership of the group. Soon the red-robed figure spoke, "Let us all gather and give praise to our Master. While Master Hades is always within us, perhaps the Exalted One will speak to us all tonight as well." With those words, everyone in the room gathered in a circle around the red-robed figure as he placed a baby goat upon the marble altar in the middle of the great room. The little goat began to bleat as the group's leader secured it to the top of the marble slab with leather straps designed for that purpose. The slab was large enough to hold a full-sized human, and Thomas always wondered if it had ever been used for that. These rituals seem so arcane. Are they necessary? He thought as he continued to ponder the spectacle before him. The red-robed leader began to chant in what appeared to be an ancient language that Thomas did not understand. While most of the participants in the room did not understand what was being chanted either, they all began to chant the words their leader was saying. Thomas reluctantly joined in. After a few minutes, the chanting stopped. The red-robed figure pulled a large ancient dagger from inside his robe, with which he used to slice the neck of the small animal. The goat's bleating stopped as it gave its last breaths. "We give this blood sacrifice to our exalted Master Hades. May our Master share with us if that is our Exalted One's desire," called out the red-robed man as he placed the blood-laden knife on the marble slab beside the freshly killed goat. Everyone bowed in silence as they waited. After a short while, a slight breeze could be felt through the great room as the torches on the walls began to flame brightly. Thomas could feel the room begin to heat up from the flaming torches as a pile of wood in a second altar trough made from granite seemed to ignite on its own. With the room now quite warm, a face could be made out hovering above the burning pile of wood. This huge red face had sharp gnashing teeth, black eyes and horns protruding on each side of its forehead. While Thomas had experienced this demon's presence before, it still gave him chills every time. Soon a very deep voice began to emanate from the floating demon face. "It is so good to see all my disciples here tonight. Each of you has been selected by my divine providence, and therefore we all share a special bond. Just as we share a connection, the entire creation shares a connection as well. While this connection throughout creation is important, it is also vital that each created being never loses their individuality. It is through this individuality that true power is manifested. It is important to remember that true power and knowledge is obtained by learning from those who have come before." The flames became more intense. Through eons of time, the hierarchical structure has proven to be the most effective means for everyone to achieve their highest potential. Due to our unique bond, I will always be available to answer whatever questions might occur during your own journey towards obtaining more power and knowledge. I must leave now, but never forget your bond with myself and your fellow brothers." "Praise be to the Exalted One," rang out from everyone in the room as the demonic face began to dissipate from above the burning logs. Before Master Hades fully departed, each member in the room felt a tingling sensation as energy from the demonic presence flowed through each disciple. It was such an honor to be in the presence of Master Hades, and to hear the Master's words of wisdom and receive the Exalted One's energy. "I now ask that you all help in cleaning and securing this space for the next time," spoke the red-robed leader. As Thomas began to help the others, he spotted the red-robed figure motioning for him to come over. Walking over to the group's leader, Thomas said, "Yes, sir. How can I be of assistance?" "Once you have finished with your obligations here, I would like to talk with you in my office." "Very well, sir. I will be there as quickly as possible." Thomas bowed slightly and then returned to help with the cleanup. Across the room, another black-robed figure witnessed the exchange between the red-robed leader and Thomas with interest. The robed figure ducked into the change room as the others continued with cleaning the huge space. With the cleanup complete, Thomas and the remaining participants went to the robe storage room and removed their robes for cleaning as well. The small room was somewhat crowded as everyone rushed to dispose of their robes and leave. As each of the disciples of Hades members began to file out of the building and onto the street, Thomas went up the stairs towards the director's office. Once outside, one of the young men headed up the street for a couple blocks and then took a left and walked towards a black van parked 50 yards away. Ensuring no one had followed and no one was present, the young man knocked on the side of the van. Soon the van's door slid open as the young man climbed inside. A slightly older man looked at the young man and nodded. "Excellent work, Andrew. I assume the monitoring device has been planted?" "Yes. I put it in Halloway's pants pocket. You should be able to turn it on now." "Once again, your service to the Lightworkers Collective has been extraordinary. It is prudent that you return to headquarters and work on purging tonight's experience from your mind. We will take it from here," said the team leader. Nodding acknowledgement, Andrew quickly left the van and headed towards his vehicle parked a few blocks away. "Please come in, Mr. Halloway," said the director after hearing Thomas knock on the door. As he entered the large elaborate office, Thomas bowed his head slightly. "Good evening, sir. How can I be of service to you and the DOH?" "I have a task for you, Thomas. It comes directly from our master." Feeling slightly startled that Master Hades would require Thomas's assistance with something, he said, "It would be my honor to serve our master. How might I be of service, sir?" "Our master has indicated that there is an upcoming event in Colorado that he would like you to attend. Master Hades feels your particular skills could come in handy." "No problem, sir. What is this particular event?" "The event is called Builders of the New Paradigm. While the event is not of particular importance, there is an individual attending that is of importance to our master. Master Hades has indicated that a young man by the name of Matthew Larson will be attending the event, and he is soon to be of utmost importance to our enemies. Our master would like to begin gathering information on this young man, so we can perhaps use this Matthew Larson to uncover our enemies and thwart any plans they may have." Rising from his chair, Thomas said, "I will begin preparations right away." "Excellent, Mr. Halloway. I fully agreed with our master's decision to use you for this assignment. In other matters, I understand you will be joining Senator Goldstein's team." "That is excellent to hear. Once your current assignment for the DOH is complete, we can work on securing your political future." "I look forward to that, sir." Getting up from his chair, the director walked over to Thomas and shook his hand. "I must return to Washington to head a meeting in the morning. Look forward to seeing you there soon." Thomas nodded to the director and left. Back at the black van parked a few blocks away, the team leader said, "Use the encrypted channel to inform Central Command of what was just discussed. It looks like Mr. Larson may be joining the team sooner than expected." Boulder, Colorado. Slowly waking up from a deep sleep, Matt heard the shower running in the bathroom down the hall. A smile came over his face as he pictured the lovely and sexy body of Julia showering just a short distance away. "I should go join her," he thought as he began to get up from the bed. Just then, Matt heard the shower shut off. "Damn, I waited too long." Soon, Julia came into the room wrapped in a towel. "I see you finally woke up, sleepyhead." "Yeah, I actually woke up early this morning and did some research. Then I came back to bed around 5 to try and get some more sleep." "Okay then. I guess I can't harass you anymore this time. It's the weekend. What should we do?" "Well, I was thinking you, Dan, and I should take a hike up around the Flatirons. There is a climbing route I wanted to check out as well. The weather is supposed to be great all day." "That sounds like an excellent idea. I'll give Dan a call after I get dressed and let him know our plans while you shower. Then I will see what I can whip up for breakfast." "You are amazing, sexy and beautiful all wrapped up in one person, babe," said Matt before giving Julia a passionate kiss. He patted her behind before heading to the bathroom. After a tasty breakfast of omelets and bacon, Matt and Julia put on their hiking shoes and gathered their day packs. Fortunately, Julia had more or less moved in with Matt by this point, so a lot of her clothes were already in his apartment. When her current lease ran out in a couple months, she would be moving in with Matt full-time. Their relationship had really blossomed over the last year. Julia and Matt knew in their hearts that they had each found their soulmate. Once outside, Matt and Julia got on their mountain bikes and started pedaling towards the Chautauqua trailhead. "Dan said he would meet us at the trailhead around 10 a.m., said Julia as they continued to bike the 5 miles to the trailhead. "Yeah, I bet he will be coming on his moped," laughed Matt. As Matt and Julia neared the Chautauqua trailhead, they spotted Dan standing beside a moped. "No mountain bike?" yelled Matt as they got closer. "You know those seats are hard on my ass, and you know what?" Dan shouted back. Matt and Julia laughed hard at Dan's words as they pulled up to a stop beside him. After chaining the bikes and moped together, the three headed to the trailhead to begin their adventure. Heading up the trail, the spring morning was particularly nice as a slight breeze washed across their faces and the sky was a bright hue of blue with not a cloud to be seen. Having lived in Colorado his whole life, Matt still marveled at the incredible blue skies that were commonplace in Colorado. Soon graduation would be upon them and new paths pursued, so it was nice to just walk, talk and laugh as they took in the scenery. After hiking along the Flatiron Loop Trail for a couple miles, the three friends headed up the Royal Arch Trail to the rock arch that allowed hikers an incredible view of Boulder and the surrounding areas. Once at the rock arch, the three sat on a flat rock and took in the scenery as they drank some water. "I never tire of this view," said Julia as she took out her phone to take a couple pictures of the city below. "Yes, this is a perfect day for a hike. How about we head over towards the first Flatiron after our break here? There are some new pictures I would like to check out," Matt suggested before taking a big swig from his water bottle. "That sounds great, babe. What do you think, Dan?" After a fake groan, Dan said, "As if I have a choice. You two may need to haul me out of here." Laughing, Matt smacked Dan on the back and said, "Oh, come on, old man. You can make it." "Old man? I'm only a couple years older than you." "That's true, old man. So no excuses then," said Matt as he got up from the rock. Julia and Dan got up as well so they could all start heading towards the first Flatiron. Once at the base of the first Flatiron, Matt looked up at the massive rock before him, and felt a tingling inside as he remembered all the climbs he had done on both the first and third Flatirons. He had started climbing with his dad when he was 12. Due to natural talents and a strong body and grip, he was soon climbing 5.7 routes and above all over Colorado. Julia began climbing with Matt a short time after they first started dating. While she was nowhere near as accomplished as Matt, her strong will and athletic body allowed her to already climb some pretty difficult routes. As for Dan, he preferred to just belay his friends from a nice position on his back at the bottom of the routes. "I'm too big for all that climbing stuff. I'll just stay down here and help," was Dan's response every time Matt tried to get him to climb. Eyeing a relatively new 5.9 route, Matt took out his binoculars to get a better look. "I'm going to hike around to get a closer look at this route from the top. Why don't you two hang out here and I'll be back in about 15 minutes. "Sounds good, Matt. We'll hold down the fort until you get back," Dan offered as he found a good shady spot to lie on his back against the rock wall. "I'm going to walk around a little bit and get some pictures. Please be careful." "I will, babe. Be back soon." Matt turned to head up around the backside of the first flatiron. After reaching the approximate area where the 5.9 route topped out, Matt scrambled up the rocks so he could get a better look at the route from the top. Looking over the top, he spotted his friends below. The steepness of the route could really be felt from this vantage point, as he took in the beauty of the rock face. Climbing back down, Matt looked around and found some good places to anchor to if he and Julia decided to try rappelling down the wall after he climbed it. Within 15 minutes, Matt had hiked back to where Julia and Dan were. "Whatcha think, buddy?" asked Dan as he saw Matt approach. "I think this is going to be an awesome climb. Hopefully the weather cooperates, so I can try it next weekend." Matt looked towards Julia, who had just come back from her short hike to take pictures. "I also found some good anchor points, so we can do some rappelling afterwards." "That sounds like fun, babe. I can't wait." "Well, I think all this hiking and scouting entitles us to some ice-cold beer. How about we check out the new offerings at Upslope Brewing," said a smiling Dan as he got up from the ground. Smiling, Matt said, "I like your thinking, friend. Shall we head on down?" Once they had arrived at the Upslope Brewing Company, Matt, Julia and Dan grabbed some food at the food trucks outside before going inside to find the cold beer. The weather was still nice, so they grabbed their food and beers and found a table outside to listen to one of the local bands playing some alternative rock. "That was so much fun." "Great idea, babe," said Julia just before taking a bite of her food. "Yeah. I'm glad the weather cooperated today. Springtime in Colorado can be unpredictable sometimes." "So, are we still on for Wednesday in Denver?" asked Dan. "Yes. Julia and I talked about it, and we would both like to see what the builders of the new paradigm is all about. I've done a little research on them and I think they have some great ideas." "Yeah, I've been talking with some of my fellow programmers and they all think BNP might have the potential to really create some great change in the world," said Dan before taking a big swig of his beer. Soon, the three friends were talking about all the wonderful things that could occur if the world became more united and less nationalistic. They also talked about how their generation seemed to be more naturally inclined towards a more unified social and economic structure. After a couple more beers and some great stories and laughter, the three decided to call it a night. With darkness approaching, Matt and Julia got on their bikes and headed back to Matt's apartment. Dan waved at the two as he climbed on his moped and drove off towards his own apartment. As Matt and Julia continued to pedal towards the apartment, Matt could not help thinking that someone was following them. Each time he looked behind, he was unable to see anything unusual. "That's weird. Not sure why I feel someone is following us. Maybe the upcoming darkness is making me a little nervous. Oh well, we will be home soon." After an uneventful week, Matt, Julia and Dan piled into Matt's Jeep for the trip to Denver and the builders of the New Paradigm event. Once at the hotel, the three walked inside and headed in the direction the huge sign in the lobby pointed to. As they entered the conference room, one of the event organizers dressed in a t-shirt, with a BNP logo greeted them. "We are so happy you came. I think you will find our presentation enlightening. Thank you for putting on this event. What you all are trying to accomplish will be the positive change the world needs," replied Matt, as he shook the young lady's hand. After shaking hands with Julia and Dan, the young lady said, "Please find a seat. We will begin the presentation around 6. Then there will be some refreshments and time to mingle with the other participants after the presentation." Once settled in their seats, Matt looked around the room and noticed that seats were filling up fast. "I'm happy to see such a good turnout for this event." Soon, a young man went up to the front and turned on a laptop to reveal the first slide that read, "Welcome to the Builders of the New Paradigm event." Waiting a couple minutes for everyone to get to their seats, the young man announced, "Hi everyone. My name is Rick. I will be showing you all a little bit on what we are about, and what we are trying to accomplish." For the next 40 minutes, Rick presented various slides and went on to explain BNP's mission, and how they hope to build a more equitable world that would bring communities and nations together around common goals, rather than continuing the separation paradigm experienced around most of the world at that time. At the end of the presentation, Rick opened it up for questions. "The ideas presented tonight are great. I just was curious how we would finance these changes that need to happen," asked one of the participants. As I stated earlier in the presentation, one of the main goals for builders of the new paradigm is to change our current social and economic structures. Other organizations such as the Zeitgeist Movement and the Venus Project have already proposed incorporating a resource-based economy, and BNP plans to work with these organizations to build the best social and economic systems possible. These new structures will require new technologies and infrastructure to successfully integrate. BNP is already recruiting individuals to help with these necessary technologies. We will also work with the existing political system to encourage our representatives to support the infrastructure changes needed. After taking a quick sip of his water, Rick continued, "Along with working to integrate new infrastructure changes, BNP will also work with our representatives in DC to try and divert the current income tax and social security payments into an investment fund that could help finance the technology and infrastructure changes needed to build a more resource-based economy. The added benefit to the financing plan proposed by BNP would be a better retirement plan for those currently paying into the social security system." Soon, another audience member asked the question, "I feel BNP's plan is a good one, but getting entire nations on board might prove difficult." I agree with that assessment. Fortunately, Builders of the New Paradigm is gaining new members every day in countries around the world. As we continue to utilize the skills of our members to work on the technologies and infrastructure changes, we will also use the power of numbers to create political influence around the world. We feel that great change always comes from the inside first, so we will continue to recruit and teach new members as we move forward with our mission. After answering a couple more questions, Rick told everyone that there were refreshments available at the rear of the room. Getting up from his chair, Thomas Halloway looked around the room. "That was an incredible presentation. Don't you two agree?" exclaimed Dan to his friends as they all headed towards the refreshments at the back of the room. "Absolutely. They have some excellent ideas and plans to implement them," agreed Matt. "I just love how they wish to build a more united world," said Julia as she grabbed a paper plate to partake in the refreshments offered by the Builders of the New Paradigm. "Yeah, I'm really considering joining BNP after graduation. I think my coding skills could really come in handy." "I think that's awesome, buddy, and you are definitely one of the best software developers I know." As the three continued to talk about the presentation, a well-dressed young man walked up to them and said, "Hi, my name is Thomas. That presentation was amazing and the concepts discussed seemed doable to me. What do you all think? Reaching out his hand to shake Thomas's hand, Matt responded, "Hi Thomas. I'm Matt. We were all just talking about the presentation, and we also feel that the time is right for these new changes." As the conversation continued between the four, Thomas suggested they all head over to a brewery close to the hotel and continue their discussion over some local brews. "I'm always up for drinking some good beer. What do you say, you two?" exclaimed Dan. Both Matt and Julia nodded in agreement, so the four headed out of the hotel and towards the brewery down the street. After getting their beers, the four continued their discussion. "So Thomas, are you a college student as well?" Matt asked their new friend. "I am indeed. I'm majoring in politics at Yale University." "Yale, huh? I wouldn't think many students from Yale would be interested in what BNP is proposing," said Matt, before realizing what he had just said to Thomas. "Oh shit. I'm sorry. I just blurted out without thinking," said an apologetic Matt. "That's okay, Matt. Wait until I tell you my full name. I'm Thomas Halloway." "Are you part of the Halloway family associated with Halloway Enterprises?" asked Dan. "I am indeed. In fact, I'm supposed to get together with my family in New York City tomorrow night." "Well, now I'm really intrigued. My experience has been that most of the wealthy in this world are quite happy with the status quo in respect to the current social and economic structure here in the US and abroad." "You are absolutely right, Matt. My views have generated concerns from many of my wealthier friends and family." "Well, I probably speak for us all when I say that you have a refreshing viewpoint," said Dan as he raised his beer mug to toast Thomas. As their conversation continued, Thomas learned that the three college students from Boulder loved the outdoors like most Colorado residents, and they were, in fact, planning a rock climbing outing that weekend at the First Flatiron. "You should join us, Thomas," exclaimed Dan. "Thank you for the offer, but I will be in Washington this weekend. I have just accepted a position to work as an assistant for Senator Goldstein." "That's incredible. Perhaps you might be able to help BNP in the political arena down the road," suggested Dan. "Perhaps that might be a possibility," agreed Thomas. After talking a while longer, the four agreed to get together again soon as they all left the brewery to head back to their cars. New York City, New York. Stopping in front of the 60-story building in downtown Manhattan, Thomas got out of the limo and took in the sights, smells and sounds of the city. "I just love this place," he thought as he headed towards the main lobby. "Good afternoon, Mr. Halloway. So good to see you again," said the doorman as he opened the door. "Thank you, Jeremy. I hope you and your family are doing well." As with many of the buildings in Manhattan, the lobby spoke of the great wealth for the building's tenants. Fine glass and stone sculptures adorned the lobby as Thomas walked across the elaborate tiled floors towards the private elevator. Thomas entered the elevator and pressed the large P on the elevator's keypad. The high-speed elevator whisked him to the top floor of the building. Once out of the elevator, Thomas walked toward the huge mahogany door at the end of the hall. Scanners in the walls and ceiling detected the chip under Thomas's skin. A click could be heard as the massive door unlocked. Walking into the living room, Thomas was greeted by his mother. "It is so good to see you again, dear. I have missed you." Elizabeth Halloway came over and gave Thomas a big hug and kiss on the cheek. "It is good to see you again, Mother. I hope you have been well. Your father and I have been busy as usual, but we are trying to take in some relaxation time as well during this latest New York visit. The chef is preparing the meal now. We will be dining around 6. "That sounds splendid, Mother. Where is Father?" "Your father is working in his study. We have been attending meetings all week. He is preparing for tomorrow's meeting to finalize the Malarcom acquisition. Okay, I will not interrupt him now. We can all catch up at dinner. I'll go and freshen up. As Thomas walked into the elegant dining area, Thomas Halloway III rose from his seat at the head of the table and came over to greet his son. It is so good to see you again, son. Congratulations on the new position with Senator Goldstein. Thomas's father shook Thomas's hand and gave him a hug. Thank you, father. It's really nice to visit again. Once Thomas and his father finished embracing, he walked over to his mother and gave her a hug before looking towards the young man seated next to his mother. Hello, brother. I hope life has been treating you well. Rising from his seat, Darren Halloway shook his brother's hand and said, Life is always good for a Halloway. You are getting ready to enter the real world soon, I hear. Yes. I will graduate in a few weeks and then it's off to Washington. You were always the smartest of us all. I know you will do us proud, brother. Thank you, Darren. That means a lot coming from you. Thomas looked at one of the empty chairs. So where is our sister off to these days? She just finished her first year at Columbia and wanted to unwind at the island home in the Bahamas. Not sure why. It's so hot down there in the summer. Probably working on her tan, said Thomas as he and Darren started to sit down. Dinner conversation went well as Thomas talked about his new opportunity in Washington, and his parents talked about their recent cruise to some of the islands in the Caribbean. Darren had come on the cruise as well to try and get more comfortable with the huge yacht systems, and learn more about some of the trading activities that Halloway Enterprises still performed in the area. Having graduated college a couple years ago, Darren was now working to learn all the nuts and bolts of the family business. While Darren was learning a lot of skills that made him more valuable every day, he knew deep inside that his parents still favored their youngest son, Thomas. For reasons Darren still did not understand, the name Thomas was given to his younger brother instead of himself. Thomas knew in his heart that his parents favored him over Darren, but he still admired Darren's many natural talents and always looked up to his older brother. With dinner complete, Thomas Sr. asked Thomas to join him out on the terrace. As father and son looked out over the city, Thomas Sr. said, So Senator Rochester informed me of the task he has assigned you. How is that going? I just interfaced with Matt Larson last night. I guess I don't quite understand his importance. He appears pretty normal to me. Matt and his friends invited me to join them on a rock climb in the Flatirons this coming weekend. I guess Matt wants to try a new 5.9 pitch on the first Flatiron. I won't be able to join them, but I plan to visit Matt and his friends in Boulder soon. Very well, son. Just remember, if Master Hades feels he is important, I assure you he is. You must continue to try and find out what his role is. From what I understand, Matt Larson is a threat to the DOH, and will need to be eliminated in the future. That seems pretty extreme, but whatever the master says, said Thomas as he continued to look at all the city lights below. Standing behind the curtain of the partially opened door leading out to the terrace, Darren heard the entire conversation between Thomas and his father. This is my opportunity to prove my worth and value to this family, thought Darren before pondering his next moves. Boulder, Colorado. Matt, Julia and Dan talked excitedly about what they had learned at the Builders of the New Paradigm event, as they drove back to Boulder. I sure hope BNP's goals can be achieved. This world so needs a new direction. I agree 100%, babe. Once we finish up the semester and graduate, maybe there will be something each of us can do to contribute to the cause. I'm really considering joining BNP once I graduate, said Dan before adding, Boy, that Thomas Halloway is quite the well-spoken and charming character. Don't you agree, Matt? Matt hesitated slightly before nodding. Inside, Matt's intuition was telling him that something was not quite adding up concerning Thomas Halloway. I just can't shake the feeling that some of Thomas's words may not have been as sincere as portrayed. After dropping off Dan, Matt and Julia headed back to Matt's apartment. As he drove the short distance back to the apartment, he once again had the feeling they were being followed. Glancing multiple times at the rearview mirrors, Matt still was unable to recognize a tail. "Is everything okay?" Not wanting to alarm her, Matt responded, "Yes, everything is fine, babe. I guess I'm just a little tired from the night's activities and drive back from Denver." Soon, they were parked in front of the apartment building. Julia jumped out of the Jeep. "I'm going to take a quick shower before bed. Maybe you could join me." "That sounds great, babe. I'll be right there." As Julia headed towards the apartment, Matt stayed behind to take a quick walk around the block. Satisfied nothing unusual was lurking in the shadows, he headed back home. As he sat in his first class of the day, Matt's mind wandered towards the upcoming weekend and the climbs planned on the first Flatiron. With finals coming, this may be my last opportunity to do some climbing for a while. Saturday can't come soon enough, thought Matt, as the math instructor finished explaining how the Fibonacci sequence of numbers could be seen throughout nature. This amazing sequence of numbers is obtained by adding the two previous numbers in the sequence to each successive number, with the graphed results showing spiraling patterns that are readily seen throughout nature. This incredible pattern of numbers shows us how math is interspersed throughout nature, and helps give strength to the intelligent design theory proposed by many scientists and philosophers throughout history. Please try to ponder this as you all go out to enjoy the rest of your day and the upcoming weekend, said Professor Johnson before dismissing the class. After what felt like an eternity for Matt, the weekend finally came. Rising early that Saturday, he had already began packing all the necessary climbing gear. With all the gear packed and ready, he made some breakfast for Julia and himself. Smelling the bacon cooking in the kitchen, Julia opened her eyes to take in the morning sunlight that was just starting to come through the opened window in the bedroom. The fresh, cool morning air felt good as Julia rose from bed and put on a robe to join her man in the kitchen. Matt watched his attractive girlfriend approach the kitchen. "Hey babe, I made some breakfast." "Thank you, babe. I could smell it from the bedroom. It really smells good." As they sat down to eat, Matt said, "I checked the weather and it is supposed to be pretty nice this morning with possible showers later this afternoon. We should probably get going pretty soon." "Okay, I'll grab a quick shower after we eat. I should be ready to go by 8. "Awesome. I'll call Dan and tell him we will be at the trailhead by 9, said Matt just before putting a delicious piece of fresh cooked bacon in his mouth. After another wonderful bike ride to the Chautauqua trailhead, Matt and Julia pedaled over to Dan, who was waiting with a grin on his face. "What's got you so giddy?" asked Matt. "Well, believe it or not, I had a date last night and it went really well, if you know what I mean," replied Dan. "Oh my gosh. I was getting worried you would be a virgin forever," teased Matt. Julia giggled at Matt's comment. "Very funny, you two. It just so happens that I've slept with a woman before." "Oh come on, dude. You can't count that time with the high school slut you hooked up with at that party." "Ha ha. She told me I was special that night." "I recall you both being pretty drunk that night," laughed Matt as he rolled his eyes. The three secured the bikes to the moped, and started walking up the trail towards the first Flatiron. Once at the base of the rock face, Matt scanned the routes he was planning to scale that day. "I think I'll start off on the 5.5 route first to warm up." Matt put the climbing gear pack down and pulled out the climbing rope, harness, and climbing shoes. After putting on his harness and shoes, he ran the climbing rope through his harness and tied the standard figure-8 knot to secure the rope to the harness. Julia checked the knot and made sure there was at least a 6-inch tail coming out of the knot. It looks like the roots already have good anchors, so I shouldn't need to use any more. I have some on my harness just in case, said Matt as he reached into the pouch on his waist to chalk up his hands. Don't worry, man. We will be watching down here and I will keep a tight belay as needed, assured Dan as he ran the rope through the belay device connected to his harness. Julia checked out Dan's belay setup and gave a thumbs up. With that, Matt started up the rock face. After climbing up about 15 feet, he pulled up some rope and clipped into the first anchor of the route. The first part of the route had some large rock protrusions that provided good hand and footholds as he continued up the rock face. He came to a large crack in the rock face. Using the crack as a perfect place for handholds, Matt jammed 3 fingers into the crack as he found a couple smaller rock knobs to put his feet on. He proceeded to climb the crack portion of the route for the next 30 feet, as he adjusted his hand and foot positions along the way. As he came upon an anchor, Matt would slip the rope through each carabiner attached to the anchor. Soon the crack disappeared, and smaller foot and handhold protrusions were all that were available for the last 20 feet of the climb. Clipping into the last anchor at the top of the route, Matt did a fist pump and a thumbs-up sign to indicate he had made it to the top. He could hear the cheers from his friends below as he prepared to be belayed back down. Dan slowly lowered Matt down the rock face as Matt leaned back to rappel down to the start of the climb. Once at the bottom, Matt said, "That was awesome." He looked towards Julia. "The anchors are really good, and you should be fine on the first part of the route if you want to try it." "I would love to," said Julia as she helped Matt untie. Soon, Julia was all tied in. Matt took over belay as Dan checked out everyone's setups and gave a thumbs up. With the rope now run through all the anchors, Julia would be climbing in what was called a top rope setup. In this climbing configuration, Julia would be able to concentrate fully on the climb and not worry about clipping into the anchors as Matt belayed from below. "On belay," called out Julia as she started up the rock face. Matt watched intently as Julia navigated the first 40 feet to the crack. "You're doing great. Now remember to shove your fingers in the crack as far as possible before adjusting your footing," yelled up Matt. Julia gave a thumbs up before getting her first finger holds in the crack. As she methodically jammed her fingers into the crack and readjusted her footing, she soon completed the entire 30 feet of the crack. Things began to get tougher as she started climbing the small rock protrusions. Soon all her limbs began to ache from the intense climbing. With her arms and legs now shaking from the effort and pull of gravity, Julia decided she had climbed far enough and gave the signal to be belayed back down. "That was awesome," said Matt as Julia got to the bottom. "Yeah, everything felt really good up until I got past the crack." Julia shook out her arms and legs to avoid any cramps. Looking up at the sky, Matt said, "The clouds are already starting to build up. It looks like we might have about an hour or two before the rain comes. I would like to try the 5.9 pitch before calling it a day." "No problem, buddy, let's do it," said Dan as he pulled the climbing rope down through the anchors on the 5.5 pitch Matt and Julia had just climbed. With all harness connections and belays set up and inspected, Matt began the 5.9 pitch climb. Meanwhile, on the other side of the top of the 5.9 pitch, a figure came out of the trees and descended to the area Matt had been checking out just a week earlier. Finding some good places to tie off, Darren Halloway began setting up his anchors for the solo rappel he planned. Next, Darren quietly climbed the backside to the top of the 5.9 pitch. Peering over the top, Darren could make out the tiny figure of Matt just starting up the rock face. Hurriedly, he climbed back down to tie the rope into his harness so he could begin rappelling down once Matt had climbed up about halfway. Earlier that week, after hearing the conversation between his father and brother, Darren had done some research to find out more about this new 5.9 route on the first Flatiron. Coming into the park early that morning so not to be seen by anyone, Darren hiked up to the trees behind the 5.9 pitch so he would be ready when Matt attempted that climb. His plan was to rappel down while Matt was climbing up and knock Matt off the rock, before using his ratchet system to climb back to the top and escape down the backside of the Flatirons. As Matt methodically climbed the route, Dan yelled up, "You're doing great, man. Let's hurry up so we can go get some beers before the rain comes." Matt gave a thumbs up before continuing up the challenging rock face. As his friend approached the halfway point, Dan saw someone come over the top of the pitch and proceed to rappel down the rock face towards Matt. "What the hell?" exclaimed Dan as he watched a collision on the rock face about to happen. "Hey Matt, watch out. Some idiot is rappelling right down towards you," yelled up Dan from the base of the 5.9 pitch. Looking at some mountain flowers, Julia turned around and looked up to see someone rappelling right down towards Matt. "Honey, you should come down now," yelled up Julia. After hearing Dan and Julia's shouts, Matt looked up to see a figure rappelling straight down towards him. Just then, a thunderclap sounded in the distance as light rain began to come down. Seeing the current dilemma unfolding, Matt signaled Dan to begin lowering him. Once Matt had rappelled down about 10 feet, Darren came slamming into Matt from above. Fortunately, Matt's anchors were still holding after being knocked sideways from the crash. "What the hell are you doing, man?" yelled Matt as he watched this strange person prepare to hit him with a backfist. Countering the backfist, Matt applied a Krav Maga fist strike to the young man's face while holding onto the rock as best as he could. The punch made Darren fall back against the rock face. Furious, Darren pulled a knife from his waistband and pushed himself back towards Matt with the intention of cutting Matt's rope. Seeing the knife, Matt quickly swung his right arm down onto Darren's left arm. Knocking the knife from Darren's hand, Matt switched grips on the rock and swung his left arm around to deliver a powerful backfist blow to Darren's head. Knocked back from Matt's backfist, Darren lay against the rock while holding his belay as best as he could. Darren felt his weight start to pull on the figure-8 knot. To his amazement, he watched the too short tail slip through the figure-8 as the knot untied and slipped out of his harness. Quickly, Darren grabbed the unsecured rope with his free hand to keep himself from falling. By now, the rain was coming down harder. Holding on with all his strength, Darren felt the rope slip through his hand and watched in horror as it spiraled back up the rock face. Darren's rope unraveled through the anchors set up at the top as he fell towards the bottom. "Heads up," yelled Dan as Darren's body came crashing down to the ground a short distance from where he and Julia were standing. Julia screamed as she heard the thud from Darren's body hitting the ground. Keeping his composure, Dan continued to belay Matt back down to the base of the climb. Once on the ground, Matt quickly untied and rushed over to where the strange young man had landed. "His breathing doesn't sound good, but he still has a pulse. Dan, I think you should go get some help while Julia and I stay with this guy." "Okay, Matt." Dan turned and headed down the trail towards his moped. While they waited with the critically injured young man, Julia asked, "Who is this guy? It looked like he was trying to knock you off the rock." "He was trying to knock me off. I don't know who he is. I do think someone has been following us the last couple weeks. I'm not sure if this guy was involved with that or not." While Dan made excellent time getting down off the Flatirons and into Boulder, it still took almost 2 hours before the sheriff deputies and ERT personnel arrived. After about an hour, Matt thought the young man had died but was not sure until the ERT personnel confirmed his death. Searching through the young man's wallet to obtain identification, one of the deputies shook his head before saying, "Shit. This is going to become a circus. This young man is Darren Halloway." Washington, D.C. "The senator can see you now," said Senator Goldstein's assistant. "Thank you, dear. It has been a pleasure getting to know you. Perhaps we could go get a drink sometime," said Thomas as he extended his arm out to shake the pretty assistant's hand. "I would like that, Mr. Halloway," said the smiling assistant as they both held their grips a little longer than normal. Thomas walked over and knocked on Senator Goldstein's door. "Please come in, Mr. Halloway," called the senator from behind her desk. Please call me Thomas. Mr. Halloway just sounds so formal. As you wish, Thomas. Please have a seat. The senator went over some of Thomas's responsibilities and activities associated with his new position. As always, Thomas asked the perfect questions and made Senator Goldstein feel totally at ease. Thomas, I really like your questions and I see great potential in you. We have notified Yale of our need for you to start right away. You already have more than enough credits to graduate, so the administration has agreed to our request. You can formally go through the graduation ceremony in June if you like. Thank you, Madam Senator, for arranging my early graduation. I've been ready to move on for a while now. As I have been saying and will continue to say, I'm here to serve you and this office in any capacity you deem necessary. If any of that benefits myself, that is just icing on top of the cake. Laughing now, Senator Goldstein said, You are good, young man. I think this is the start of a wonderful relationship. I think we should go out to lunch and get to know each other better. I would love to hear about your family and the family business. That sounds outstanding, Senator. I would love to get to know you on a more personal basis as well. Excellent then. Let me finish up a couple items and then I'll call for my driver. Sounds good. I'll wait outside until you are ready. After a short while, Senator Goldstein came out of her office to find Thomas chatting and laughing it up with her assistant. I see you and Sandra have met, and it looks like you two have hit it off. I suppose I'm not surprised by that, Mr. Halloway. Yes. Sandra is an awesome person and I look forward to working with her and the rest of your staff. Senator Goldstein nodded her approval before looking towards her assistant. Sandra, could you please notify the driver that we are on our way to the parking garage? Yes, ma'am. I have also reserved your usual table at the Capitol Grill as you requested earlier, said Sandra as she picked up the phone. Thank you, dear. Senator Goldstein gestured for Thomas to walk with her. Almost to the elevator, the two met Senator Rochester as he was exiting the elevator. Hello, Madam Senator. It is good to see you again. And who is this young man? Hi, Roger, it has been a while. This is my newest assistant, Thomas Halloway. You may have heard of his family and their business. I have indeed. We actually have some ongoing contracts with Halloway Enterprises. Well, it was nice to meet you, Thomas, said Senator Rochester as he gave Thomas a light slap on the shoulder and shook his hand. Thank you, Senator. It is a true honor to meet you. Thomas shook the senator's hand while bowing slightly. Entering the limo from the secure Senate parking facility, Senator Goldstein instructed the driver to take them to the Capitol Grill. Seated at the senator's usual table, the two looked over the menu and made their selections known to the head waiter. I just love a good steak and a good Cuban cigar, don't you agree, Thomas? I'm a huge fan of good old-fashioned steak. I don't really smoke, but I'm game for almost anything. Can we even smoke in here? We can do anything I wish. I'm glad to hear you are so open to new experiences. I have a few in mind myself, Senator Goldstein said as she looked towards Thomas seductively. Soon, the two were puffing away on expensive cigars and drinking wine while chatting away as they waited for their steaks. Just as they were finishing their meals, Thomas's phone rang. Looking at his phone, Thomas said, I'm very sorry, Senator, but this is my mother, and I should take the call. Of course, said the senator as Thomas rose from his seat and headed to the back of the restaurant. After a short while, Thomas came back to the table. I'm sorry, Senator, but I must leave for Colorado. The family jet is waiting at the airport. My brother has been in a terrible accident, and I need to get out there as soon as possible. I fully understand, Thomas. Go take care of your brother. We can pick up where we left off when you return. Can I have my driver drop you off at the airport?
Thank you, Senator, but there is a limo on its way now.
Thomas gave the senator a quick hug and kiss on the cheek before turning and heading out of the restaurant. En route to Boulder, Colorado. Rather than interacting with the jet staff as usual, Thomas remained very solemn for the entire flight to Colorado. Remembering his mother's cries on the phone and the terrible news she told him earlier, Thomas heard her words in his mind once more. "He is gone, my son. Your brother is gone." As those powerful words from his grieving mother rang through his head, Thomas was overcome with grief. He was my hero. I just can't believe he is gone. After a few hours in the air, the private jet landed at the Denver International Airport and parked at the Halloway Enterprises hangar. A limo was waiting to take Thomas to the Boulder County Coroner's office. Once Thomas arrived at the coroner's office, he was escorted inside by one of the sheriff's deputies to identify his brother's body. As the sheet covering Darren's body was removed, strong emotions began to well up inside as he nodded his head to affirm the body was his brother, Darren Halloway. With identification complete, Thomas's limousine was escorted to the Boulder County Sheriff's office. Walking into the building, Thomas spotted Matt Larson sitting with Julia and Dan. I wonder why they are here? Could they be involved somehow in Darren's death? He was escorted past the three and into the sheriff's office. Inside the office, Sheriff Baker said, "Please sit down, Mr. Halloway. I would like to go over the details as we know them so far." Thomas nodded and sat down in the chair across from the sheriff. "We have eyewitness testimony that states Darren Halloway rappelled over a climbing route Matt Larson was on, and tried to knock Mr. Larson off the rock. A fight on the rock ensued. During this fight, it appears Darren Halloway's tie-in at the harness came undone and Mr. Halloway fell off the rock. Mr. Larson's friend, Dan Alderson, is the one who contacted us first concerning the incident. While Mr. Alderson went for help, Matt Larson and Julia Harper remained with your brother until my deputies and ERT personnel arrived at the scene." "How are you sure that something was not done to my brother before your deputies arrived?" "Well, we are not 100% sure, but accounts by the deputies and ERT personnel, along with initial examinations of the scene, indicate no foul play other than what occurred on the rock face. You definitely have the right for an autopsy to be performed on your brother, and I highly recommend that you do. Our family's legal counsel is on his way now. I would like to have an autopsy performed as soon as possible, so he will have that information once he gets here." "Very well, Mr. Halloway. I will call the coroner's office once we are through here." With that, Thomas got up from his seat and shook Sheriff Baker's hand before turning to leave. Walking out of the sheriff's office, Thomas spotted the three young college students again and glared intensely at Matt as he walked by them in the waiting area. Angry from what he just observed, Dan said, "Why the hell did he just stare at you like that? It was his crazy brother who tried to kill you. He should be apologizing for his brother's actions, not looking at you like this was your fault or something." Trust me. Grief is a powerful emotion and there are always questions when a family member dies. I'm sure Thomas and his family will see reason once all the facts are in. Matt, you are such a special person. Even with all that happened today, you still see good in people, said Julia as she put her hand over Matt's hand. Soon afterwards, one of the sheriff's deputies came up to Matt and said, "Sheriff Baker would like to talk to you again." With that, Matt got up and followed the deputy to the sheriff's office. Once he had sat down, Sheriff Baker said, "Even after I told him all the current details, Mr. Halloway still suspects foul play and is upset right now. While I still feel the completion of the investigation will exonerate you, the Halloway family obviously has extensive resources. I would strongly advise you get your own legal representation as soon as possible." "I understand, sir. I really don't know any attorneys, but I will start looking for one." Just as Matt had finished talking, a knock on the sheriff's door interrupted their conversation. "Come in," called out the sheriff. Coming in behind the sheriff's deputy was a young man dressed in a suit. The deputy said, "Sir, this man claims he represents Mr. Larson." Both Sheriff Baker and Matt looked questioningly at the young man before them. "I apologize for any misunderstanding. While I am currently not Mr. Larson's attorney, I would like to offer my services pro bono if Mr. Larson accepts." While Matt knew nothing about this person offering his legal services, Matt strangely felt something inside tell him he should accept the young attorney's offer. "I accept your offer. You may represent me in this matter, Mr. I am Andrew Connor." Andrew looked towards the sheriff. "Could I please have a moment in private with my client, Sheriff?" "Of course. Deputy Larkin, please escort Mr. Larson and his attorney to the interrogation room down the hall." Once in the privacy of the interrogation room, Andrew Connor sat down and motioned for Matt to sit down as well. "I know this has to be a little unsettling right now, but I want you to know that I work for an organization that only has your best interest at heart. I have been following you for a couple weeks now, and I fear your life may be in danger. This current incident has definitely confirmed that for us." Shocked now, Matt asked heatedly, "Are you even an attorney, and why have you been following me?" "Yes. I am an attorney, but I'm also much more than that. I'm part of an organization called the Lightworkers Collective. Believe it or not, Mr. Larson, you will eventually become a key player in this organization." After further conversation between Matt and his new attorney, Andrew convinced Matt that he should go with him to the LC's headquarters in the southwestern part of Colorado. "I would like my friends to join me on this trip." After pondering Matt's request, Andrew said, "Unfortunately, I can't tell any of you three much right now, but I assure you everything will become clearer once we get there. If your friends are okay with that, then they can come along. We must leave soon. Everything the three of you need will be provided, so there is no need to pack." Matt got up and went outside the interrogation room to find his friends and bring them back for Andrew's brief explanation of the current situation. Seeing Matt come their way, Dan asked, "Hey Matt. What's going on?" "My new attorney would like to explain the situation to you too. Can you both please follow me to the interrogation room?" While both Julia and Dan were bewildered, they nodded in agreement and followed Matt. After Andrew went over the current details, Dan said, "While this all seems rather clandestine, I'm in, Matt." "Me too," said Julia as she looked into Matt's eyes for more clues to what was going on. Matt looked at Julia and Dan and said, "Thank you both for agreeing to come with me. It means a lot to me." Andrew spoke briefly to the sheriff before escorting Matt, Dan, and Julia to a white SUV. Once everyone was inside, Andrew instructed the driver to head back to LC headquarters. As the white SUV headed towards their destination, Matt tried to get more information out of Andrew with no luck. Sensing Matt's frustration, Andrew said, "I'm sorry I can't divulge much right now. I can tell you that all your questions will be answered soon." With everything that had happened that day so far, the three friends eventually fell asleep as they rode in the back seats. When Matt finally woke up, he recognized the Colorado town of Durango. Matt had spent a lot of time in Durango during his childhood. Matt's grandparents on his mum's side lived in Durango, so Matt would stay with them when his parents had to go away on business. Matt loved the place. Hearing the sound of the Durango and Silverton narrow-gauge railroad train making its final steam whistle of the day, brought back wonderful memories of riding the train and rafting down the Animas River with his parents. After a quick stop to refuel, they continued on Highway 160 west towards Cortez and then northeast on Highway 145 towards Telluride. By this time it was dark as they continued driving on Highway 145. After driving for a way on Highway 145, the driver took a right on a nondescript dirt road and continued driving up into the mountains. Soon they came upon a wrought iron gate with 10-foot-high security fence attached on each side. The driver punched in a code and the gate opened. After driving a short distance, the SUV came up to a hillside that had a well-camouflaged bunker protruding out of the hill. This bunker had a door big enough to drive a semi-truck through, and the bunker door started to open as they drove towards it. Inside this initial area of the bunker was a small parking garage. The driver parked the SUV and everyone got out. Looking around, Dan said, "This is some James Bond shit. Hope we are working with the good side." "Me too," said Matt as he slapped his friend on the shoulder. "Please follow me," said Andrew as he headed towards a metal door on the east end of the parking garage. Soon scanners on the walls and ceiling began to scan everyone, before a small door to the right of the large metal door opened to reveal an eye scanner. Andrew aligned his chin on the provided support, as green beams of light began to scan his eyes. A loud click sounded as the large metal door swung open. As everyone filed in behind Andrew, Matt stopped in his tracks when he saw the two people standing in front of him. New York City. When Thomas arrived at the penthouse, he found his mother and sister consoling each other in the living room. After hugging and kissing his mother and sister, he motioned for his father to join him on the terrace. Looking out over the bustling city below, Thomas said, "The Boulder County Sheriff said that eyewitnesses saw Darren rappel over the route Matt Larson was climbing, and then he attempted to knock Larson off the rock face. Apparently Darren's rope knot at his harness came loose. Due to the rain, he was unable to hold onto the rope and fell." Furious at hearing about the incident surrounding his son's death, Thomas Sr. said, "How did Darren know the Larson kid would be climbing that day? What the hell was he thinking? Why would he do something so reckless and foolish?" Knowing inside that Darren was just trying to do something to make his parents feel proud, Thomas shrugged and said, "Darren must have heard us talking out here the other day and decided to take matters into his own hands. Your mother is really taking this hard. Right now, she thinks it was just a climbing accident. I think it is best that we continue with that story. In the meantime, I will contact the director and find out what the master feels is the best course of action moving forward. I will let you know what I find out. We should go inside so the family can talk together about funeral arrangements." Thomas nodded acknowledgement and said, "You go ahead, Father. I just want to take a moment out here before heading back inside." As he stared out over the city, his emotions over his brother's death began to heat up again. Feeling angry at the circumstances surrounding what had happened, Thomas thought to himself, "How could this nobody still be alive while my brother is dead? One of the few people I looked up to in this world is no longer here. In a way, this is my fault. Brother, I swear I will avenge your death and sacrifice. This nobody will pay." Southwestern Colorado. "Matthew. You look good, son, I so missed you," cried out Matt's mother as she ran towards him before throwing her arms around her only child. Stunned and flabbergasted, Matt could only stutter, "But you and Dad are supposed to be dead." "It's a long story, son, but we are both so happy to finally be able to see you again in person," said Matt's father as he came over and put his arms around his wife and son. Both Julia and Dan were shocked and happy as they observed the incredible reunion. As tears welled up from the powerful emotions he was experiencing, Matt said, "I never really could accept your deaths. Something never felt right about the whole thing. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Trust us, son. We never wanted to do this to you, but events have been in play that would not allow us to let you know we were still alive. We both felt it was important that you go to college as you had always intended, but you would have been in grave danger if certain factions and entities knew we were alive," said James Larson. Still dazed from the reunion with his parents, Matt remembered his best friends were with him. "Mom and Dad, these are my best friends Julia and Dan. You both should remember Dan, and Julia has become very special to me." Matt gestured to his closest friends to come over. "Hello, Daniel. It has been a while. It is so good to see you. We were both happy to see that you and Matthew remained friends and were able to attend college together, Jennifer Larson said as she gave Dan a big hug. It is awesome to see you and Mr. Larson as well. Dan gave Matt's mum a hug back, then walked over to Matt's father and gave him a hug. Julia's heartbeat climbed as she witnessed the reunion between Matt's parents and the two special guys in her life. Soon, Matt grabbed Julia's hand and said, "Come on, babe. I want you to meet my parents." Matt excitedly looked at his parents. "Mum, Dad, I want you to meet my soulmate, partner, and best friend." "It is so wonderful to finally meet you, Julia. We were told that Matt had a girlfriend and that you two appeared to be very much in love," Jennifer said while holding Julia's hand. "Hi, Julia. I'm James." From all accounts, it seems Matthew could not have picked a better person to spend his time with. "I also sense that we might all be together for a very long time," said Matt's dad before giving Julia a big hug. Smiling now, Julia said, "Yes, your son and I have really grown to love each other. While nothing official has happened yet, I suspect your son will rectify that soon." Laughing, James said, "My son is a smart young man. I just know he will do the right thing." Moving to the kitchen and dining area of the underground complex, the five all sat at one of the tables to talk a while longer. Always curious, Matt began to fire questions at his parents. Matt's father said, "Matthew, I know you, and I also know you have tons of questions. We want to answer all your questions, but I think it is best that we all get a good night's sleep before diving into all the information you want and need to know. Besides, there is someone special we want you to meet tomorrow. This special being will be able to help answer any question you may have. Mary has arranged accommodations for you three, and she will show you to them now. We can continue our conversations over breakfast." With that, everyone rose from the table and hugged once more. Once settled and lying in bed with Julia, Matt said, "I wonder who this special being is that we are supposed to meet, and why did my dad refer to this person as a being? I'm not sure, babe, but I'm sure all our questions will be answered tomorrow. Now please snuggle closer, so I can fall asleep." "My pleasure," said Matt as he spooned in close. Taking a quick shower together, Matt and Julia got dressed in the undergarments and one-piece overalls provided, and headed out to the breakfast area. "Hey you two kids, how did you both sleep last night?" "I slept like a baby," called out Dan after seeing his friends approach. "The quiet hum of the various underground systems put me right to sleep too. They've done an excellent job of not making it seem like you are living in a cave," replied Matt as he looked around. "I woke up hungry and decided to come out here and see if anything was available. They have a nice breakfast buffet. I thought I was staying at the Holiday Inn Express or something," said Dan, before shoving some bacon in his mouth. Once Matt and Julia had gotten some food and sat down, Dan said, "I still think I'm in some kind of James Bond movie, but it sure was nice to see your parents still alive." Nodding in agreement, Matt said, "It's still a little unsettling, but I'm very happy they are alive. I just hope my questions can get answered today. You know how I am?" "Oh, you know we do, but your insatiable curiosity is one of the many things I love about you," said Julia as she put her hand on top of Matt's. Soon, James and Jennifer entered the dining area dressed in the same one-piece outfits the three young college students wore. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. L. How did you two sleep?" "Good morning, Daniel. We slept wonderfully. I hope you all slept well," said Jennifer as she and James grabbed some food from the buffet spread, before coming over to the table Matt and his friends were sitting at. After talking about how great the underground complex was for sleeping, the five discussed all the various systems used to keep the place habitable, safe, and secure. Matt probed his parents about the accident. James began to explain how they had obtained a couple recently deceased pigs from a local rancher sympathetic to the LC's cause. Stopping quickly at one of the many hairpin turns on Highway 550 that night, James and Jennifer had placed the pigs in the front seat of their SUV. James then leaned into the open driver's side window and used a stick jammed into the seat to engage the gas pedal all the way down, before quickly shifting the vehicle into drive before jumping out of the way. Before James sent the SUV flying over the cliff, he and Jennifer spread a special chemical mixture produced by the Lightworkers Collective throughout the vehicle to induce intense combustion once the SUV caught fire at the bottom. The intense heat from the combustion melted much inside the SUV, and the deceased pigs were turned to ash. The sheriff and some of the county deputies that had responded that night were also members of the Lightworkers Collective, so they were able to ensure all the evidence pointed towards a tragic accident that claimed the lives of James and Jennifer Larson. "So we have pig's ash buried in the ground by your headstone in Denver?" asked Matt. "I'm afraid so, son, but that's better than it being your mum's and mine. Don't you agree?" Smiling, Matt said, "Very much so, Dad." Next, James and Jennifer Larson explained how the Lightworkers Collective formed over 200 years ago to counter various sinister organizations hell-bent on systematically turning much of the world's population into worker slaves, for the aristocratic class that ruled these ominous and self-serving organizations. They essentially want most of the world's population to be forever under their rule, and for most of Earth's history, that has been pretty much the case. Fortunately, the LC has some powerful forces on its side now, and we are using their wisdom concerning true reality to start to get an upper hand, said James. Just then, an extremely bright light began to appear in the dining area as the three young college students watched in amazement. Old Greenwich, Connecticut. After the funeral service at the First Presbyterian Church of Greenwich, the Halloway family invited all those who attended to come out to the Halloway estate near Greenwich Point Park. Due to the unique stature of many of the guests in attendance, the Halloway estate provided the best security for everyone attending the funeral reception. Nestled by the ocean on 10 acres, the 40-room Halloway mansion was truly spectacular. Along with the main residence, it included smaller dwellings for the large staff, and a breathtaking view of the Atlantic Ocean and all the surrounding harbors. As distinguished guests arrived, the estate staff and caterers quickly worked to get everyone seated at the tables set up throughout the lavish area at the rear of the mansion, facing the ocean. With most of the guests seated, the Halloway family walked up onto the stage and stopped at the podium set up for the event. Walking over to the microphone, Thomas Halloway III looked out over the crowd. "Thank you all for coming to honor, remember, and celebrate our son and cherished sibling Darren Halloway. As the oldest child, Darren was looked up to by his brother and sister. Our dear son personified everything the Halloway name stands for. Wanting to learn everything he could about Halloway Enterprises, Darren worked doggedly to learn the many aspects associated with the business. The plan had been for Darren to succeed myself one day and lead Halloway Enterprises into the future. The whole family is very saddened right now, but we are all grateful each and every one of you could be here today. Please enjoy the food and drink provided and let us all remember Darren in our own special way." Once Thomas and his family came down from the stage and sat down at the family table, the mansion staff and caterers began taking food and drink orders from the many guests who had come to pay their respects. Later, as everyone ate and mingled about the luxurious courtyard and surrounding area, Senator Rochester came over to where Thomas and his father were talking with some guests. After the usual greetings and light conversation, Thomas Sr. excused himself before gesturing for Thomas and Senator Rochester to follow him inside the mansion. Once inside his study with the door closed, Thomas Sr. said, "This room is fully secure. We can all converse freely here." He looked towards Senator Rochester. "Director, do you have any news for us?" "Yes. Our master has indicated that our objective is to still use Matthew Larson to try and infiltrate the LC. The master would like to use the girlfriend to achieve this. We have currently lost sight of Mr. Larson and his two friends, but as soon as the girlfriend surfaces, we need to detain her. The senator looked at Thomas. Thomas, the master wants you to oversee this operation. I will start to put a team together as soon as possible, sir. We will continue surveillance in Boulder, awaiting her return. Excellent, son. Use any Halloway Enterprise resources you need for this, but be as discreet as possible. Senator, thank you again for your leadership and service to our master and the DOH. The three men made a special gesture with their hands before leaving the study to join the funeral reception again. Underground in the southwestern Colorado mountains. The light continued to get brighter and brighter, as a figure started to appear in the dining area. Shortly the bright light dissipated as an elder man appeared. Matt's parents bowed slightly to the old man, and James Larson said, "Master Kenjison, it is so wonderful to see you again." Looking around the room, Master Kenjison's eyes narrowed on Matt. So here is the destined one. His aura is so strong already. This incarnation appears to suit you well, Ancient One. Your veil of forgetfulness is strong, but we can fix that in time. Somewhat in shock from what he had just seen and heard, Matt stammered, "Who are you?" "I am just someone who comes to assist those in need of discovering their true potential." "Oh, if you only knew what that potential meant, young man, but I will show you." Master Kenjison nodded and smiled at Matt as if they were old friends. "Dude, I have never in my life seen anything so cool," blurted Dan to the elderly man standing before them. "Ah, the devoted friend throughout time. You two have been friends longer than you could imagine," said the master as he nodded towards Dan. Now looking at Julia, Master Kenjison said, "So here is the third special entity of this magnificent trio. So good to see you again, my dear. You do not remember me, but I definitely remember you. So beautiful and such a lovely spirit as always. You seem to know us somehow." "How is that?" Matt asked the elder man before him. "As always, so curious. That powerful trait can be both a blessing and a curse sometimes. We will try to make it a blessing as much as possible. As for your question, the powerful trio that is you three have been intertwined through a vast amount of time and space. We will explore that further as we move forward with your training." "Training? We all need to finish this semester so we can graduate," said Matt as he looked at his parents. "Matthew, we have made arrangements with fellow LC members at the university. They have assured us that you all have more than satisfied your credit obligations and can graduate without attending any further classes if that is your desires," explained James while looking at the three young college students. "So cool. I'm in," exclaimed an excited Dan. "Matt, I'm not sure I want to skip the child psychology and development class I'm currently in. You know how much I love children and I want to be able to help and teach children someday," said Julia. "I understand, babe. I think I should go back with you to ensure you are safe." Seeing the apprehension in her son's eyes, Jennifer said, "Matthew, I understand your love and concern for Julia. I promise, the LC can protect Julia. Your role in all of this is vital for the success of the Lightworker Collective's mission. Both your father and I feel strongly that you should stay here and train with Master Kenjison." While Matt was still feeling very conflicted, Julia assured him she would be okay and would return as soon as the semester ended in a few weeks. Master Kenjison talked a while longer with everyone before telling them he must leave for a short while, but someone would be coming soon to start the training. Later, as they held each other tightly, Matt said, "Julia, I don't want you to leave. We are soulmates. I need your strength and strong will to make sure I do this right." "I understand, babe, and it is hard to leave you here. But you are right, we are soulmates and nothing can ever change that. Just as the old man told us, I have always felt that special bond between us that seems to go beyond time and space. We will be together soon. Please keep your mind clear and learn all you need to learn. From what I have witnessed so far, your role in all this is very important." Julia kissed Matt with much love in her heart. Once they both released their embrace, Julia turned to follow Andrew out of the complex towards the SUV parked in the underground garage. James came over and put his arm around his son's shoulder. "Son, I can see how special that young lady is and how much she means to you. Your mother and I share the same kind of bond. I know it's hard to see her leave, but you two will have a long and beautiful life together." "I know, Dad. It's just been pretty intense the last couple days, and now I'm being told I'm some kind of savior for the human race or something. I'm finding all of this a little unsettling right now." Nodding in agreement, Matt's father said, "I fully understand, son. I can only imagine how all this feels from your perspective. Your mother and I have known about your potential destiny since you were a child, so we now realize your reality is ready to shift towards that new potential, and it is exciting for us. Please be patient. I know Master Kenji-san will help you reach your full potential." Soon a young man came into the room and looked towards both Matt and Dan. "Hi, I'm Michael. The Master has requested that you both work with me for a while on your fighting skills before he starts the more advanced training." Looking at each other briefly, Matt and Dan nod towards Michael before all three headed out of the room and down a half-moon-shaped corridor. Walking down the passageway a ways, they came upon a large metal door on the right. Michael punched in a code and opened the large door. Matt and Dan looked around in amazement. Behind the large metal door was a dojo that looked like something straight out of medieval Japan. "Wow, this is so cool," exclaimed Dan as he looked around the room. As his eyes took in the various wooden and steel weapons mounted on the walls of the dojo, Matt couldn't help but be impressed as well. "We will use this area to concentrate on your fighting skills. I will be your lead instructor for the next couple days. Please use the changing area to put on the training clothes that have been set out. We will get started when you both are ready," said Michael before pointing towards the far end of the dojo. Once Matt and Dan returned from changing, Michael handed them a pair of fighting gloves and helmets that matched his own. "First, I would like to gauge where you both are concerning your martial arts skills. I apologize in advance because this may involve some pain and discomfort from your end before we are done. Please remember, it is nothing personal." Matt and Dan looked at each other as they put on their gloves and helmets and smiled. 4 years of intense Krav Maga training had made both young men formidable fighters. They felt more than ready to accept Michael's challenge. "I will test the big man's talents first," said Michael as he motioned for Dan to join him in the middle of the dojo's training area. Once the young men were in position and facing each other, Michael said, "Please attack when you are ready." "If that's what you want, man," said Dan before advancing towards Michael. Immediately, Dan swung a powerful crossbody punch towards Michael's chest. Michael sidestepped away from Dan's punch with relative ease and landed a sidehand chop to Dan's side. Stinging from the pain, Dan said, "Oh, you want to use some traditional chops? Okay then." The large young man swung down towards Michael's neck and shoulder area with the outside ridge of his hand. This time, Michael used both arms held together in a clenched grip to counter Dan's powerful blow. As his knife chop came down towards Michael's neck, Dan winced in pain as his strike hit what could only be described as a steel bar. "What the hell?" yelled Dan as he stopped to shake off the pain in his right hand. "Please take a break while I test your friend's skills." "Okay, man, but we're not done yet." Dan walked over to the side of the dojo training area. "That was pretty impressive, but let's see how you fare with me," said Matt as he got into position across from Michael. "Attack when you are ready," said Michael. Matt started with the same crossbody punch to Michael's chest. Once again, Michael sidestepped the strike and prepared to deliver another knife strike to Matt's side. This time Matt was able to move just in time to avoid the strike. As Matt moved out of the way of Michael's strike, he swung around 180 degrees before landing a solid back fist against the side of Michael's helmet. Stunned from the unexpected blow, Michael smiled and nodded in approval. Before Matt realized what had happened, Michael initiated a swift series of hand and foot strikes at his body that knocked Matt back onto the dojo's hard wooden floor. As Michael leaned down to help Matt off the floor, Matt looked up and said, "Well, I'm impressed now. Are you planning to show us how to do that? I've never seen such speed." "I will, and much more," responded Michael. "Holy shit, Matt. He hit you so fast, I could barely make out what he was doing. You okay, Matt? Or do I need to teach this guy a lesson?" Now back up on his feet, Matt said, "Thank you, my big friend, but I think we both have a lot to learn from this guy." During the next couple days, Michael taught the two young fighters where all the major pressure points were on the human body and how to deliver precise hand and foot strikes to those areas. Along with the pressure point training and general martial arts skills training, Michael showed the two how to use their breath to draw in outside energy to revitalize their bodies during combat. At the end of the 2 days, both Matt and Dan could feel the difference in their skill levels. Always analyzing himself and the world around him, Matt realized that while his martial arts skills were much better, he still didn't have the speed he observed that first day fighting against Michael. After Matt verbalized his thoughts to Michael, Michael said, "Those speed skills you mention are advanced skills that involve the mind more than the body. Master Kenji-san will be instructing you on how to expand your mind, and on how to use it to accomplish many things." "Sweet, I can't wait to learn how to do that," said an excited Dan. "Dan, I'm afraid Master Kenji-san has requested only Matt's presence at this time. I know he plans to train you in these advanced skills later as well, but right now the Lightworkers Collective needs your other skills. ALC's leadership would like you to help our IT specialist in shoring up our security systems, if that is okay with you." "Sure. I'm always interested in playing with IT systems. Just get me in front of a computer." Dan looked at Matt and fist bumped him. "See you later, man, and good luck." Once Dan had left with one of the IT specialists who came to get him, Michael escorted Matt out of the dojo and down the tunnel to another door on the left. The new room was incredible to observe. White granite rock formed the walls in what could only be described as the inner chamber of a pyramid. Each of the 4 walls ran up almost 100 feet to a point at the top. The actual point at the top appeared to be pointing up through the mountain and to the outside. Matt could see some light coming down from the top of this internal pyramid, which was made of a translucent material. In the middle of the pyramid was a chair made from granite, as well. The white and black granite chair had intricate patterns cut into it that Matt was unfamiliar with, but they seemed to look like hieroglyphics from ancient Egypt. Turning towards Michael, Matt exclaimed, "This place is amazing. I am glad you approve. This place creates special energy that I believe you will find to be beneficial in your latest training." Michael's body began to transform into the body of the elderly Master Kenji-san. "What the hell?" exclaimed Matt as he watched the transformation unfold before his eyes. "This place just keeps getting weirder and weirder," thought Matt as he shook his head. "I thought it was best that we explore the more advanced teachings with me in this form. Consensus reality seems to prefer true wisdom, coming from one who appears to have lived a long life." Master Kenji-san stared at Matt before smiling and adding, "It is quite refreshing to see you have not tried to run away or kneel in reverence when you observe these strange things. Perhaps your veil of forgetfulness is not as strong as I initially thought. My understanding of reality has definitely been stretched these last few days, but for some strange reason what I've been observing is not making me think I'm crazy." "That is good, my young apprentice. For what I am going to show you these next few days may indeed test your sanity. I believe before we get too involved in the advanced training, it is important that you get a better understanding of what makes up the reality that you observe around yourself each day. The simple truth is that all reality is but an illusion made from thoughts from within the mind of all. In fact, all of creation is the result of an infinite consciousness that forms everything. As a part of this vast infinite mind, our own individual consciousnesses have the same creative powers. The ancient fundamental principles, as above so below and as within so without, state this powerful truth very well. So you are trying to tell me that everything I see, smell and hear is just an illusion in my mind? In a sense that is true. What makes it feel so real is that your physical body and accompanying intellect are part of that illusion as well. Based on that fact, your current physical reality is indeed very real, and all physical laws apply, but a true practitioner of the ancient wisdom arts can use absolute law to transcend relative law. Your true power lies in the ability to use your conscious thoughts to rise above current reality, so you can change it to any new reality you desire. Even after all I've witnessed these last few days, what you're saying is hard to fully believe. I understand your disbelief, Matthew. Even the greatest masters were where you are now, at one point in their existence. I think it is best to show you what I have been talking about. Please sit upon the granite chair, and we will begin your training. Matt sat down on the granite chair in the middle of the chamber. I know you have meditated before, so now I would like you to close your eyes and try to calm your mind of all thoughts. As you do this, you should start to feel a sense of peace inside as your mind goes blank. Matt closed his eyes and began to feel all tension release from his body. He started to feel tiny jolts of energy surge through his spine and out through his hands. At this point, he experienced a bright light in his mind and even more peace. Feeling a light touch on his shoulder from Master Kenji-san, Matt's mind suddenly went to a whole new place. Intricate patterns composed of some colors he had never experienced before ran through his mind, as enormous energies flowed up through his feet and body, and out through the top of the pyramid-shaped chamber. Soon, Matt's mind-eye began to see waves of various frequencies of energy that seemed to move about like water. From these waves of energy he began to make out the shapes of the granite rock that formed the chamber walls, and then he saw the figure of a man that had a very bright, energetic light surrounding him. Matt's consciousness expanded beyond the confines of the pyramidal chamber and out into space. As his consciousness continued to expand, he was able to observe Earth and all the other planets in the solar system in incredible detail. His inner mind enlarged further to include the galaxy and on to showcase the entire universe and all that existed within. Even as he viewed reality from this new perspective, Matt knew in his mind that he was still only experiencing a very tiny part of creation and the all that is. As he intended to return to his present reality, he was instantly transported back to the granite chair he was sitting in. Matt opened his eyes and looked around in amazement. Wow! Was that a dream? While there is indeed not much difference between what you perceive as reality and the dream state, it was in fact your consciousness viewing reality from a higher perspective. It was all as real as anything else you normally recognize as reality. Well, you definitely have my attention now, Master Kenji-san. Please show me more. Boulder, Colorado. Once Julia returned to her apartment on Sunday, she prepared everything for her classes scheduled the next day. As the week went on, Julia thought about Matt and what he might be doing. I sure miss him. Hopefully we can meet up sometime soon. After dinner, Julia got a call from one of her classmates. Hey girl. We should go get a drink and talk about whatever. Feeling a little lonely, Julia decided to go out for a little while to take her mind off Matt, and maybe have a little fun talking with one of her friends. Okay, Michelle. I'll meet you at Mountain Sun in about an hour. Sounds good, Julia. See you soon. Since she had gotten back to Boulder, Julia knew that people from the Lightworkers Collective were watching her. What she did not realize was that there were others watching as well. The observers Thomas hired to watch for Julia had notified him Sunday night that Julia was back in town, but it did not appear that Matt or Dan had returned. Excellent. This should make things even easier, thought Thomas. With the news of Julia's return, Thomas made a phone call to get the next step of the plan going. After setting up the crew that would kidnap Julia, Thomas received another call from the watcher assigned to Julia. It looks like there is a detail watching the target. Not sure, but they may be there for protection. Please advise. Continue to monitor the target. I will inform the rest of the team of the current situation, Thomas directed before hanging up and calling the other team. We need to wait before abducting the girl. Let's put together a plan and make sure we know how many people we are dealing with before proceeding further. A few more days should be fine. The air was pleasant that Wednesday night as Julia walked out of her apartment to go to her car. As she had been observing since her return to Boulder from the southwest mountains, she could make out headlights from a car following her. This made her feel better as she headed towards the pub. Protection detail is 3 blocks behind the target. Car number 2, proceed to arranged intercept point and disable the vehicle and occupants, commanded the leader of Thomas's kidnap team. Stopping at a red light, the 2 LC protection team members waited for the light to change green. Julia had already informed them of her plans, so they knew they wouldn't lose her. Out of nowhere, the 2 men in the LC car heard the sound of air escaping from the tires. Grabbing their weapons, the men quickly jumped out of the car to find all 4 tires flat from what appeared to be gunshots. Before the men could get into proper defensive positions, sleeping darts hit each man's neck. With the LC detail now immobilized, the leader of Thomas's team was notified that all was clear to proceed with the capture of the target. Julia pulled into a parking area close to the Mountain Sun pub. She watched as the car she thought had been following her pull into the parking lot as well. Getting out of her car, Julia was confronted by 2 men she didn't recognize from the LC. "Miss, you need to come with us now." "Who are you guys? I don't recognize either one of you." Just as Julia was about to scream for help, one of the men grabbed her by the arm and used his other hand to cover her mouth. Struggling with her potential captor, she managed to bite the man's hand and kick him hard in the privates before starting to run away. With the 1 man bent over in pain, Julia ran as fast as she could away from her car and the 2 men. Almost to the end of the parking lot, she felt a sharp pain in her neck. Reaching back, she found a dart was lodged into her skin. She quickly pulled out the dart, but it was too late as she began to lose consciousness and fell to the ground. As Julia started to regain consciousness, she found herself bound to a chair in a large room that appeared to be part of a larger warehouse space. Her arm and hand were scratched and ached from the fall in the parking lot, but luckily she did not hit her head when she fell unconscious. Soon, one of the men she encountered in the parking lot came over. "You put up quite the fight last night, young lady. My partner is still feeling the pain from your kick," said the team leader before chuckling to himself. "Who are you and why did you guys abduct me?" "I'm afraid I can't tell you anything right now. Maybe you will get some answers later. I need to go to the restroom. Please untie me." "I will untie you, but don't do anything stupid. Even though I have orders not to harm you, I can't guarantee my partner won't bring you some pain if you try to escape." He's still quite upset. As Julia was led to a bathroom, she tried to get her bearings. A train whistle blew outside. "I don't remember any warehouses this big near railroad tracks in Boulder. Maybe I'm in Denver," she thought as she washed the blood off her arm. Once done in the bathroom, Julia was escorted back to her chair in the other room. After a couple hours, she spotted a young man approach wearing what appeared to be an expensive suit. As he got closer, Julia realized the young man was Thomas Halloway. "Why have you kidnapped me?" "Well, hello Julia. I'm sorry for all the fuss, but I really need to get your boyfriend's attention." "They will find me," shouted a now somewhat scared Julia. "They? Do you mean the Lightworkers Collective? I don't think they are going to find you here. This warehouse is not even on any recent maps." Thomas added, I suspect your protection detail has contacted headquarters by now. Once your boyfriend shows back up on the grid, I fully intend for us to meet and discuss his options. Don't worry, beautiful, I'm counting on Matthew making the right choice concerning you. Just then, Thomas's phone rang. Hello, Senator. What can I do for you? After a short time he nodded and said, Of course, ma'am. I can be back in Washington tomorrow. Thomas looked down at the tied-up Julia. Well, it appears I have some responsibilities to take care of back east. I have instructed these men to move you to another room with bathroom facilities. Please be on your best behavior. I don't want them to do any untold harm to you. Thomas turned and headed back where he had come from earlier. Underground in southwestern Colorado. Reading from a book called The Kybalion, Matt was thoroughly intrigued with the concepts and principles it discussed and taught. Master Kenjisen had given him the book after his experience on the granite chair. While this book was written in the early 1900s, the Hermetic philosophies the book's material is based on are part of some very ancient esoteric wisdom. Please study this book and commit it to memory. It will enhance all the training you will be receiving, spoke the master as he handed Matt a specially bound copy in blue cloth stamped in gold. These principles all make a lot of sense now. I can see how they relate to all of the incredible things I've been learning with Master Kenjisen, thought Matt, as he pondered all that he had learned the last couple days. A knock sounded at the door of his sleeping quarters. Opening the door, Matt found his father standing outside with a worried look on his face. Son, I'm sorry to say this, but it looks like Julia has been abducted. What the hell do you mean, Dad? I thought they were watching her. James proceeded to relay all the details to his son. We need to head back to Boulder right now. I fully understand your concern, son, and the whole LC team is working on trying to locate her. Walking into the IT lab, Matt spotted Dan at one of the computer terminals. Have you located her yet? Not yet, buddy. We have been going over all the intel we have so far, but haven't been able to determine a possible location yet. Based on the most logical scenario, we suspect she is being held in a warehouse somewhere. The LC team in Boulder has been checking out all the warehouses in the city with no luck. As he contemplated the situation, Matt decided to use his newfound knowledge and skills to try and locate his partner and soulmate. Racing back to the pyramid room, he sat on the granite chair and calmed his mind. Using his intense love for Julia, Matt expanded his consciousness to try and locate the love of his life. As his consciousness expanded beyond the pyramid chamber, Matt saw Julia lying on a small bed in a dark room, with moonlight shining through a barred window near the top of one of the cement walls. As he continued focusing on her, Matt heard a train whistle in the background. Just before coming out of the meditation, Matt felt a strong intuition that Julia was in Denver. Racing back into the IT lab, Matt exclaimed, I'm pretty sure she is in a warehouse somewhere near railroad tracks in Denver. That's great, Matt. That will help us narrow down the location, said Dan as he frantically began to type on the keyboard. While still analyzing all the possibilities in his mind, a thought came to Matt. Hey, due to everything that has happened, and the way Thomas Halloway looked at me the other day, it's likely that he is involved somehow. I think we should try to find a connection with Halloway Enterprises. A short time later, Dan shouted, That was an awesome idea, man. I think I found our warehouse. He motioned for Matt to come over to his display. Heading towards Denver. As they drove towards Boulder, Andrew said, Don't worry, Matt. There are the 4 of us, and we also have 4 more of our people on their way to the warehouse location in Denver. Okay, just make sure they don't do anything until we get there. I don't want anything to happen to Julia. While Matt appreciated the help from the Lightworkers Collective team, he was determined to ensure Julia's safety this time. Looking over to Dan, Matt said, that was some great detective work locating that subsidiary owned by one of Halloway Enterprises' holding companies. I guess they wanted to keep this warehouse off the books. I'm glad you are with me on this.
Absolutely, man. I wouldn't have it any other way. I guess we make a good team no matter what time or place, said Dan before smacking his best friend on the shoulder. After driving for a little over 7 hours, Matt and the rest of his team were now close to the warehouse. Our team on site estimates there are 6 to 8 people at the warehouse besides Julia, Andrew said after ending his cell phone call. He looked back towards Matt and Dan seated in the back. Matt, our guys are highly trained. I think it's best you and Dan stay back until we have secured the site. Matt looked at Andrew and nodded. Andrew and the driver got out of the SUV to join the rest of the LC's on-site team. We're not going to just sit here. Are we? Exclaimed Dan. Of course not. I just know it will be better if we aren't fighting against each other. With that, the two friends jumped out of the SUV and headed towards the warehouse. On guard at the warehouse entrance, one of Thomas's team members spotted movement at the perimeter of the site, and radioed the team leader, "We have movement on the perimeter. Looks like at least 4 people." "Shit. Okay then. Go get the girl and take her to the roof," yelled the team leader to one of his men after getting the message from the entrance guard. "The rest of you head out front and stop them from coming inside." The team leader pulled out his cell and made a call, "We need air extraction now." Opening the door to the room Julia was locked in, the man said, "Stay calm, bitch, or I will slice you. I need to put these restraints on you. We are going for a ride." Before the man knew what was happening, Julia lunged at him and gave him another hard kick in the groin. "Some assholes never learn," she said before running out the door. Feet pounding down a hallway, Julia suddenly stopped in her tracks as she came upon the team leader standing in front of her. She lunged at the man and prepared to kick him in the privates, but the man sidestepped the kick and slapped her across the face with the back of his hand. The hit was hard. She blacked out from the strike and fell to the floor. The team leader then threw her over his shoulder and started carrying her to the rooftop. As the LC's team squared off against some of the abductors at the front entrance, Matt and Dan ran around the backside of the warehouse looking for the small window Matt had seen in his meditation. Soon, the sound of a helicopter could be heard coming from the east as gunshots rang out from the front of the building. Finding a window that matched what he had seen the night before, Matt stopped and yelled, "Julia? Are you there? It's Matt and Dan." Not hearing anything, Matt grabbed onto the metal bars over the window opening. Quickly centering himself and quieting his mind as Master Kenji-san had taught, he intended for the bars to give way from his pull. Soon, the steel bars pulled out of the concrete and Matt threw them aside. "Watch out, Julia. I'm going to kick out the window," warned Matt before kicking hard at the window. Once he had cleared out most of the glass and broken window casing, he slid through the opening and jumped to the floor of the small room. A man was keeled over groaning in pain, but Julia was not there. Matt kicked the man in the face and then yelled to Dan, "She's not here. I think they may be taking her to the roof. I'm going after her." "Okay, man. I'll try to squeeze through this opening and I'll come find you." As Matt raced out of the room and down the hallway, he soon came out into a large open bay area. Spying a set of stairs going up towards the roof, he quickly started heading towards the stairs when he heard the click of a gun. "Where do you think you're going?" As he stopped and looked around, Matt saw 4 gunmen coming towards him. Centering himself once again as he had learned, he used the power of his strong love for Julia as he intended for time to slow down on the inside and speed up on the outside. Before any of the 4 men could get a shot off, Matt precisely hit each of the gunmen multiple times at various pressure points. Getting to the scene just before Matt moved towards the gunman, Dan watched in amazement as his friend disabled each man with multiple kicks and punches to vital points throughout their bodies.
Once all 4 men were lying on the floor unconscious, Dan yelled out, "Holy shit! I've never seen anyone move that fast besides Michael." "We need to get to the roof now," yelled Matt as he ran towards the stairs. Bursting out the door and onto the roof, Matt's heart sank as he watched the helicopter take off and head east. As the chopper continued heading towards the private hangar at Denver International, Julia began to wake up from the earlier hit. "You are quite the feisty chick. Hope I didn't hit you too hard. I suppose that dumb ass back at the warehouse is regretting ever tangling with you," said the team leader as he chuckled to himself once more. Washington, D.C. After talking with the team leader in Colorado, Thomas called for his driver, "Come to the Senate parking garage. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. Thomas notified Senator Goldstein that he had some family business to take care of, and would be leaving for the day. Once in the car, Thomas told his driver to take him to the hotel. Pulling up to the Four Seasons Hotel, he got out of the car and headed towards the lobby entrance. "Good afternoon, Mr. Halloway. Is there anything we can do for you?" asked the concierge as Thomas walked into the lobby. "Yes. Please send up a bottle of your best scotch," answered Thomas before entering the elevator. "Right away, sir," called out the concierge just before the elevator door closed. After removing his jacket and tie, Thomas sat down in the plush velvet chair and thought to himself, how the hell did they find the warehouse, and how the hell did this Larson dude take out 4 highly trained men? I need to meditate on this matter and try to get some direction on how best to proceed. A knock at the door jarred Thomas from his thoughts. He answered the door and showed the bellhop where to leave the cart in the spacious and luxurious suite. Once the bellhop left, Thomas threw some ice in one of the crystal whiskey glasses and poured himself a couple fingers of scotch before sitting back down and taking a drink. The expensive whiskey went down smooth as Thomas started to relax. Setting the glass down, Thomas closed his eyes and began to breathe softly as his mind relaxed and peace rose from within. As his mind rested in the void, he began to think about Master Hades. Soon a voice spoke in his head, "Thomas, your service has been excellent. I know you are disappointed in this latest turn of events, but success will be yours soon. Due to cosmic circumstances, we will need to change the original plan. All 3 of the friends must die." Hearing those words in his head, Thomas came out of the meditation and pondered on what he had just heard. I can't kill all 3 of them. The Master is asking too much of me, but Master Hades has always provided us with great wisdom. I should try to get more answers. He closed his eyes and calmed his mind as he searched for Master Hades to obtain more information and direction. After hearing more words from his master, Thomas came back out of the meditation with new insights and a new purpose. Smiling to himself, he took another drink and thought, this is all part of the grand plan. I'm ready to do my part. Back in Colorado. Once the helicopter had gone out of sight, Matt and Dan went back down to find the rest of the LC team. They had finally secured the front entrance and were now inside the building. Seeing Matt and Dan coming down the stairs, Andrew said, "We should leave the scene and regroup. The authorities may have been notified about the gunshots and helicopter." Nodding in acknowledgement, Matt and Dan got into the SUV with Andrew and the driver. "I'm sorry things turned out this way, Matt. We will locate her again." Still upset with the turn of events, Matt didn't respond to Andrew's words. After pondering the situation, he said, "Please take us back to Boulder. There are some things we need to take care of." "Yeah, I think I left my TV on," said Dan as he winked at Matt. Pulling up to Matt's apartment, Andrew said, "I'm going to contact headquarters for more support and direction. I'll let you know when we have a new position and plan." "Thank you, Andrew," said Matt as he and Dan got out. "What's the plan, buddy?" asked Dan once they were inside Matt's apartment. "I have to assume that Halloway will be calling soon. I didn't want everyone around in case he only wants me to come." "Matt, there is no way I would let you go alone.
We are the three amigos, remember? Smiling at his longtime friend, Matt nodded before walking to the fridge to get a couple beers. As they sat drinking their beers, Dan said, "So dude, what the hell did I just witness at the warehouse? That was some pretty advanced training you got, I guess." "Yeah, you wouldn't believe what Master Kenji-san taught me. I guess I'm a pretty fast learner. Something about my previous lives. I'm still trying to understand it all, but right now, the only thing I can think about is Julia's safety and how I can get her back." "I understand, Matt. Just know that I'm with you all the way. No matter what." "Thanks, friend," replied Matt as he tapped his beer bottle against Dan's. After the second beer, Matt's cell phone rang. "Hello, this is Matt." "Hello, Mr. Larson. Been a little while, but I think we should meet in person to discuss your girlfriend's situation. Oh, and please bring your big friend along. There are plane tickets to LaGuardia for you both at Denver International. The flight leaves at 7 p.m. Don't tell anyone or your girlfriend will suffer the consequences." "I understand. We'll be there alone," said Matt before hanging up. "I guess we're going to New York City." "I'm ready, buddy. Let's do this." Once Matt and Dan cleared the arrival gate at LaGuardia, they both spotted a couple prior military types waiting near the baggage claim area. "I guess that's our ride," said Dan as they got closer. Nodding his head, Matt said, "Why don't you just hang back? You could be my backup if this goes south. Plus, I don't want anything happening to you." "Not a chance. We are in this together all the way." Coming up to the two men, Matt said, "I'm Matt and this is Dan. We know. There is a car outside waiting to take everyone to Connecticut. Follow us." Once inside the car, Dan whispered to Matt, "What's in Connecticut?" "Not sure, but I assume Julia is there somewhere. I also remember reading something about the main Halloway estate being in Old Greenwich, Connecticut." While heading towards Connecticut, the driver pulled the black SUV over to the side of the road. "Get out, you two," said one of the two men from the airport. Climbing out of the SUV in the dead of the night had Matt a little concerned. He began to calm his mind for what might come next. "Here. Put these on. After what happened at the warehouse, the boss wants to make sure there are no issues before everyone meets," said the same man before throwing a couple large tie wraps towards Matt. Matt nodded to Dan after catching the tie wraps. They put them on and pulled them tight with their teeth. "Okay, back in the car, you two. We have about 30 to 40 minutes to go before we get to the harbor dock." "Sounds like maybe a boat is involved somehow," whispered Dan after they were back in the car. "Yeah. How are your swimming abilities?" joked Matt. "Very funny, man. I'm no Olympic swimmer, but I can hold my own." After driving about 40 minutes, they came up to a private dock with an 80-foot yacht moored to it. The men ushered Matt and Dan up the gangway and onto the vessel. It was still nighttime as they all stood on the dimly lit deck. "Well, hello, gentlemen. Welcome to one of Halloway Enterprises' private yachts," spoke Thomas as he walked over to Matt and Dan. Calling out to the team leader from the warehouse incident in Denver, Thomas said, "Please inform the captain we are ready to go." "Yes, sir," said the team leader before walking away. "Where's Julia?" "Let me see her," growled Matt. "Easy there, lover boy. She's safe aboard. Here, let me show you." Thomas pulled out his cell phone. After opening an app, he showed Matt video of Julia tied up with a gag over her mouth, as she sat in a chair in one of the lower deck cabins. "What happened to her face?" shouted Matt. "I'm afraid your girlfriend got a little feisty, so my man had to calm her down. We were trying to avoid that, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. In fact, things have changed, so new plans had to be made concerning you three.
Thomas gestured for the two gunmen to grab Matt and Dan and secure their legs with heavy-duty tie wraps. Before the gunmen could get the tie wrap straps secured, both Matt and Dan kicked each of the gunmen in their knees. They yelled in pain as they each dropped to the deck. Due to the countless hours of Krav Maga training, both Matt and Dan were able to quickly roll over and get back on their feet. While the two gunmen struggled to get back up, Matt and Dan kicked each man across their face. With the two gunmen now lying motionless on the deck, Matt began to ponder how he could get the handcuffs off. "Hold it right there, you two. I won't hesitate to put bullets in the both of you," shouted the team leader as he pointed his gun towards Matt and Dan. "Take it easy, you two. You're not going to be able to help the girl if you're dead," said Thomas as he came over to secure Matt and Dan's legs with the tie wrap straps. After Thomas and the team leader dragged Matt and Dan down below, Thomas said, "As I said earlier, plans have changed, and unfortunately that means you three need to die. All records and identifications concerning this yacht have been scrubbed clean. We also added some highly combustible and explosive fuel mixtures to the bilge area of the vessel. I suspect there's going to be a huge explosion aboard this ship pretty soon." Thomas stared down at Matt lying on the cabin floor. "After what happened to my brother, I had hoped to be able to make you suffer even more, Mr. Larson, but I guess this will have to suffice. Good luck in the afterlife." Thomas turned around and climbed back up to the main deck. Thomas and his team soaked the main deck with fuel before leaving with the captain to board the smaller ship they had been towing behind the yacht. Once aboard the smaller ship, the team leader released the moorings as Thomas prepared to shoot a flare onto the yacht's main deck. Soon flames were leaping throughout the main deck of the yacht. "Shit, man! I can see flames up topside. What are we going to do?" shouted Dan. "Please remain calm, buddy. I need to center myself and focus," Matt said as he began to calm his mind. Once in the void of his mind, Matt made a strong intention to break the cuffs around his wrist. Soon he felt the cuffs start to give way as he pulled against them. With his hands now free, he maneuvered himself back to his feet to find something in the cabin to cut through the thick plastic straps. As flames continued to grow topside, Matt hopped about as he rummaged through kitchen cabinet drawers until he found a suitable knife to cut the tie wraps with. Once he had removed the straps from his legs, he quickly cut through the tie wraps securing Dan's arms and legs. "I need to find Julia. Can you make it topside and jump off the yacht with these? I will get Julia and then find you in the water," said Matt as he handed Dan 3 life preservers he had found hanging on the wall. Dan nodded as he grabbed the life preserver straps and headed back up topside. With Dan now heading topside, Matt raced back further in the vessel to find Julia. Soon, Matt came up to the cabin door of the master suite. Finding the door locked, he kicked with all his might at the door's lock area. Inside was Julia strapped to a chair. He quickly used the knife he had found earlier to free Julia from the chair. Ripping off the gag, Julia cried, "I just knew in my heart you would find me." After quickly hugging Julia, Matt said, "We need to get off this ship now. It is about to blow up." Running back towards the aft end of the yacht, they both stopped as they saw flames now engulfing the cabin Matt and Dan had been in earlier. "Hold on to me and follow me up and out. We will need to jump off the ship as soon as we clear the flames." Julia nodded her acknowledgement, as Matt once again began to center himself and focus his consciousness. Once focused in the void of his mind, he made the intention to create a shield around himself and Julia. While they both could feel the intense heat from the flames, their bodies were not burned as they climbed up out of the cabin and towards the starboard side of the yacht. Once in the water, Matt yelled to Julia to swim away from the ship. Frantically, they both swam away as fast as possible. A huge explosion sounded from the flaming vessel as they both turned to see the yacht blow up and start to sink. As the yacht began to sink below the surface, Matt yelled out, "Dan! Where are you?" "I'm right over here, buddy," shouted Dan about 20 yards away. Once they reached Dan, Matt and Julia put on the remaining 2 life preservers. As all 3 bobbed in the ocean, Julia said, "It should be light soon. Hopefully a ship will spot us." "I sure hope so. I don't want to become shark food after all this," said Dan. As they continued to float in the waves, a ship's horn could be heard in the distance. Once the vessel had pulled up beside them, the 3 friends recognized Andrew and others from the Lightworkers Collective. Once aboard the ship, Matt said, "How the hell did you guys find us?" "Thank your big friend here," said Andrew as he slapped Dan on the back. "Oh yeah. I forgot about the tracker I let them put in me back at headquarters the other day," laughed Dan. "Let's get you 3 back to Colorado," said Andrew before instructing the captain to head back to port.